I describe multi-cloud as it's like becoming an adult. It's the worst decision you'll ever make, and it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I don't think you should ever put like a multi-cloud on your resume. Like serious cloud, people are not going to take you serious.
Anytime someone is, you should learn another cloud, I'm like, how about Kubernetes?
Now, there are strategies if you're that person stuck in the bad position. Because not everybody has the freedom to quit their jobs and start a podcast. My entire job is to keep up on this stuff, and I can't keep up on this stuff. And that's what I get paid to do.
The people at AWS are awesome. AWS as a collective is almost hostile to some of its customers when it hides behind shared responsibility.
Welcome everyone to the State of Cloud Security, the community edition. We have got a lot of guests over here on both sides. If you can give a short 30-second intro about yourself, and we'll keep going through this. So I think people have some idea who are here, why they're here, practitioners, all of that.
Hello everyone, my name is Damien Burks. I've been in the cloud security community or industry for about 3 years, and in the cybersecurity or information technology industry for about 5.5 years, 4 years, and also in content creating and YouTube video creator as well.
Hey y'all, I'm Meg. I'm based out of New York City, and I've also been in the cloud security space for about 3 years.
My name's Rich Mogull. I've been in security for about 25 years and in cloud security, however long ago 2010 or 11 was. 13 years.
This is 2024 for context.
Good at cloud, bad at math.
Ammar, been in IT/security for the last 15 years, more focused on application security and cloud security for the last 10 years.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Chris Farris. I do cloud security consulting. I've been doing AWS stuff since I think reInvent 2014. So we'll say I've been doing cloud for about 10 years now and security since, I'll say 2017. So please do the math yourself.
Awesome. My name is Abdie, everybody. Pleasure to meet you all. I'm a cybersecurity and cloud professional. I've been doing this for about 5 years. Really, my main background is GRC, and I've been diving deep into cloud for the past 2 years. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with y'all.
I'm Patrick Sanders. I've been doing software for 12, 13 years now, and I've been doing cloud security coming up on 5 years.
Wow. So I guess the first question I'm going to throw in this conversation, because we have almost such a spectrum of experience as well. I want to start with cloud security for what it was when you guys started and where is it in 2024? So people can have some context for how much cloud security has changed.
It's gotten more complex. It's still a lot of the basic things that are still happening. People are creating access keys because they can. People are putting things on the internet because the defaults are insecure. So Gen AI is a thing. Blockchain was the previous thing. Serverless was the previous thing before that. But it all comes back to credentials and people putting stuff on the internet that's unpatched and overly exposed.
Yeah, in 2011, it was exposed access keys. Now, at that time, there was only root access keys because IAM didn't exist in AWS yet. There was publicly exposed resources being compromised, and then it was just virtual machines because all there was like that in S3 buckets, and it was public S3 buckets. 2024, now it's not root access keys, but it's still access keys, and it's still exposed stuff on the internet, and it's public buckets.
Awesome. So that was 20 plus years of experience. What about 5 years experience on this side?
Yeah, so when I started in the cloud, the issue that I've noticed is it's the same issue as on-prem where you have a bunch of IT assets just hanging around. So you have accounts, AWS accounts, cloud accounts, just hanging around and nobody knows who owns what, right? What are we doing to decommission this account, right? And as you guys know, having accounts just floating around, that just creates more risk.
And money.
And money.
And money.
Having EC2s just running 24/7. So I think that's still a big issue. The IT asset management, cybersecurity.
I don't know how much I have to add here. Things look pretty similar to when I started doing this 5 years. They don't realize that making something public means making it public. There's still a gap of understanding what the implications of some of these things are that we talk about all the time.
And tied in with nobody knows who owns it.
Yeah, so who do we even talk to find out?
On top of everything that they just said, one thing I'm starting to notice is misconfigurations is big and scales across the entire platform. So a lot of people, when they're deploying services, they click ups. It's one of the biggest problems. So people aren't necessarily leveraging IAC the way they should. And on top of that, what I'm starting to see also, which has been a problem, but I think companies are starting to get better is the modularization of some of the services as far as if, let's say, for instance, a team wants to spin up an EC2 instance, we should, as an organization, create modules around that with the necessary security controls embedded to help prevent misconfiguration issues from happening. And I think people are starting to notice that, but I don't think there's enough emphasis on adopting such strategies within organizations and environments.
Yeah, I would say for me, I agree with what you're saying with the public S3 buckets. And I would say that also I've seen it rear a very similar head in the internet. Also being a new way of exposing, again, I've put my resource on the internet. And I would also say I've seen a rise in what I call platform-esque services in AWS, particularly popularity of things like SageMaker and managed airflow types of services, which I find a bit difficult to understand from model of the difference between the infrastructure of the service itself and then the very distinct components of what is more of the meat of the application, like the code that's running, the notebooks, etc.
Just going to add a different perspective, which is I also seen positive stuff, even early on. And you have to bring some context. Did they just hire a VP who was all in cloud governance?
Oh, yeah.
Or they didn't know much about that? Did they had to rush a migration? And did they start with a shift and lift where they had a single account? It's messy. So you have to bring in that context and bring in the customer, like the AWS user journey, like at what stage of their maturity and whatnot. But I've seen early on, 7 years ago, serious multi-account automation where people set up proper accounts. They give you 3 stages, production. I've seen that.
Yeah.
But today you still see that doesn't exist. You still see a single account, so many access keys.
Yeah.
But that's a function of data gravity, right? You can't just move an S3 bucket from one account to another. You can't deconstruct a large multi-account without massive development effort and potentially even downtime.
I was just going to say, some of my former teammates call those account anchors, things that they keep you from being portable across accounts.
Something that I've noticed over the years is that now suddenly there's this rise of the multi-cloud people as well. And it's not by design, but by requirement is how I would describe it. Like most organizations these days, earlier, like when we started the podcast, we were only AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. Now there's Oracle Cloud. People talk about IBM Cloud. I'm like, is that even public cloud? I don't know. I think because I think especially calls out, we only talk about public cloud. I'm like, yeah, public offering. I don't know. Like, no, yeah, but the point being, as that's moving, and all of us obviously have other colleagues who are in the space as well, is the expectation from the industry that most of us should be multi-cloud and we should know, hey, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, IBM. I don't even think that was like a possibility on premise.
I think so. And the only reason why I'm saying it is because this thing I'm starting to see float around is called concentration risk within AWS, within certain cloud providers. And that risk kind of scares leadership because I guess, for example, there was a point where things went down in certain CSPs. And when things go down, of course, production apps go down, start losing money, start losing revenue. So the idea came from, okay, if we're cloud native, but we don't necessarily want to have everything in just one CSP, we need to start migrating things into different CSPs. So looking at it as more or less like a fault-tolerant way of making sure that everything's still running. But the problem is that there's a lot of different services in different environments, and then they all work very differently, even though it may seem the same way, it is very different as far as ones that specialize in it. So I think it really, there's expectation that you should know, but I always believe that you should specialize in just one and then know it at the surface level so that you don't lose your sanity.
The knee-jerk reaction to those situations tends to be some VP says, hey, see if we can deploy half of our workloads to GCP instead of AWS. As cloud security professionals, we have a responsibility to help people understand that it's not that easy. We're responsible for managing the risk of our cloud environments. And splitting our workloads across multiple clouds, yeah, it may mitigate some risks, but it introduces a whole lot of other ones.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the right decision, maybe it's not, but it's much more nuanced.
And there are other ways to achieve the availability in the CIA triad than go to a completely different foreign landscape, which is what going from one cloud provider to another is.
I describe multi-cloud as it's like becoming an adult. It's the worst decision you'll ever make, and it's going to happen anyway. And what I've seen in working broadly with enterprise clients, there's a couple of pathways. One is when they go the path you just asked about, that's a recipe for failure unless you triple your budget, and not just your security operational budget. There's this myth of, oh, we'll monitor like where it's cheaper to run workloads, and we'll build some dynamic agents going to move our containers around the workloads. I'm like,
And
all
it's just Kubernetes.
your data migration, your data plane, your log monitor alerting, your whatever, all that's going to fall apart. None of that work. I'd call it as mythical as a unicorn, but I guess in tech we have unicorns. So it's a mythical as like a, I don't know, a corn. So there's that angle of it where exactly what you said. Everybody vastly underestimates the cost and complexity of working across multiple providers. The other side of that is the skills side. And before we're making fun of it, where now there's the expectation, oh, well, we'll just have Bob and Alice figure out how to do GCP because they've been doing Amazon for a year or two. So they've got it down. All of us are probably mostly on one platform. I've been doing this for
25 years.
yeah, not cloud. Security. I was doing cloud. We had cloud. Yeah. Like I've been pretty hardcore on AWS for over a decade now. And when I come to reinforce, I talk with people and I learn stuff every day that I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm competent, I think, on AWS, and I still make mistakes. Azure, I've been on for about 7 years, something like that. And I'm hanging on by my fingernails, and I can't spell GCP. I don't know how anybody expects it, but we see people with resumes saying
MultiCloud.
multi-cloud. We see people requiring it for hiring. I guarantee you, there is nobody with that level of skill on all three clouds.
So
And I've never written a job rec that says, I want that. I want you to be proficient in one cloud and generally able to spell the other two.
just to add, we are talking about two things, right? We're talking about the need to do multi-cloud, which is a usually company decision. And the second thing is the cybersecurity engineer needed to be an expert be a multi-cloud expert.
Oh, yeah.
For thing number one, some companies don't have a choice. Your customer will tell you if they're commerce
Yeah.
driven, do not use it ever. Competitor.
You're talking about Walmart. We all know.
That's supposed to say these.
Here we go. You're right. You're in the right track. And you may be forced to go multi-cloud.
Yeah.
You don't have an option.
Yeah.
I think in that case, since I think we agree that you cannot become an expert across all these providers. You do, I think, based on my experience or what I saw, is you be in the business of enabling. So there's a use case to use GCP. There's a use case to use Azure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The team that is operating these providers, you enable them, you make them experts. You're good enough to be able to provide governance,
Yeah.
but you're not going to be an expert. You just still focus on being an expert on your main provider. Like you typically have 90% of your workloads with one.
I also feel this side to it where we can't protect that we can't understand as well. How deep we go into something should know enough the governance part to what you say. Maybe the people who say they're multi-cloud, they're all trying to say that I've done governance across the three, so I'm multi-cloud from that context as well. I'm not knee deep into it. I just dip my toes into each one of them to know what identity is like, what network security is like, what backup is. I may not be an expert, I can't implement jack shit over there, but I can definitely talk about the governance. So he's saying that's the second part here, when, oh, my career path as a multi-cloud person is that I can have that governance conversation, what that would look like across all the cloud providers. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I don't think you should ever put a multi-cloud on your resume. Serious cloud, people are not going to take you serious.
Nobody should take me seriously.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Anyone who built that cloud more than 5 years knows that it's hard to master all of them. It's just
100%,
difficult,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So be honest, just say AWS or Azure and say I maybe know
Dabble in
10% here and
Yeah.
there. Just enable your service team and empower them and enable security for them. You're not going to be an expert. They are close to their workloads. Give them the tools, give them the trainings, whatever they need. That's the only thing you can do.
If your organization or your environment has onboarded a particular CSP, you should fight to have one person who's an expert
Yes.
and a CSP.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yep.
you have to generally exactly, because at the end of the day, it eliminates that risk of people not knowing what it is that they're doing anyway. You want someone who's an expert in cybersecurity for a particular CSP to be able to do those architecture review boards, to have those discussions, to ensure that you're doing things in the best way for the CSP in a security sense.
Right.
So this is literally the call I had that made me late to come over here. It was with a mid-sized enterprise going multi-cloud and asking for strategic advice. And one of the problems with the SME thing came up because that was the first thing I said. You need a subject matter expert for each one. And they were like, well, what if we don't have a lot on Google? And I'm like, was it your customer data? Then it just doesn't matter. And they're like, that's not realistic for us to afford the SMEs. What do we do? And I'm like, you don't build your network with all Juniper and then hire Cisco people to run it. Like that's what you're asking to do here. It's just doesn't.
Some people are old enough, they would not even know what Juniper is over here, by the way.
If you can't afford the people you need to secure it, you can't afford the thing in the first place. Like,
Where you shouldn't be doing it.
well, yeah.
The other thing that brings you to multi-cloud is mergers and acquisition. That's an opportunity because yes, if you're an AWS shop acquiring a company with GCP, hopefully you're going to get a GCP expert as part of that deal. That's where you get with HR and you get a nice juicy retention bonus because you need that person. Not only do you need their institutional knowledge of the company that you're acquired, but you need them to join your team and to cross-pollinate.
I would say from my experience, anytime someone is, yeah, you should learn another cloud, I'm like, how about Kubernetes? I think that's a fair trade-off here. I tend to come from the smaller company background.
Yeah.
So for us, the realistic thing is if we say our cloud service provider goes down, we just say, we're sorry, man.
I would love to help you, but it's not me, it's you.
Unfortunately, for us, that is been a lot of our stance.
Yeah.
And I think, especially when we're looking at smaller companies, we very much have to take very seriously the time and effort of engineers
Yeah.
and things. Like we unfortunately aren't in a position where we can really have anyone just playing around with things unless we're really serious about it.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Damien here when he brought up, yeah, you need at least one expert in another CSP because it really does halt the business, creates a lot of mayhem.
Yeah.
You don't have that one person. So you create a basketball, I'm a big basketball fan, and you have nothing with shooting guards on your team. Well, where's the center? Where's the point guard? You need someone, at least one person.
You need one Kobe Bryant. And
Well, Kobe Bryant, you need one.
Yeah, fair. We need to be quite incident responsive because I think the multi-cloud model fails if you don't have an SME in. So, for example, we so-called multi-cloud as an AWS Azure Google Cloud, but if you have a team of generalists, suddenly there's an incident, and now people are like, should we ask ChatGPT? How do we proceed from here? I think that's where it falls over because I think it's always good for us to think about the positive scenarios.
Yeah.
But if we live in the world of trying to prevent incidents,
The reality is most of those organizations, and I've dealt with many who have that, they're going to call a third-party incident response firm at that
Oh, yeah.
point. We've seen that. We just saw public announcements from multiple about a breach in another cloud thingy. We're trying not to name names. In orgs I've worked with, that's okay, we're in over our heads, we're going to call somebody for help. The problem is that's going to cost you probably 3 times the annual salary of the SME that could have prevented that in the first place.
They call it cross-functional teams.
the funniest was when I was talking to a CISO about, they said they wanted to build a multi-cloud team. So I think I just tried describing it like, hey, it's like how you know how to drive a car, but you've been asked to drive a truck now. Well, isn't that still driving? It is still driving, but it's different. I think with the understanding, and to what you said, Patrick, earlier, it's our responsibility to help the other side understand that, hey, the complexity every time you move a cloud, and we didn't even touch on Kubernetes yet. I guess people who are watching and listening to this, they probably can take away from the fact that the moment their organization thinks about multi-cloud or, hey, we want you to be multi-cloud, suddenly you're asking me to just give up on something and go deep dive into something else completely, or you're hiring someone else.
Now, there are strategies if you're that person stuck in the bad position. Because not everybody has the freedom to quit their jobs and start a podcast.
All right.
What that? It's a compliment.
I'll be back in 25 years.
If you're stuck in that position, there are mitigations you can do for yourself. One is, we all know IAM is the root of all good and the root of all evil.
Yep.
Go in on IAM. And again, this goes back to what we were talking about. It doesn't matter if you're on Google, Amazon, or Microsoft. It's public stuff and IAM misconfigurations and public storage.
Yeah.
And so if you focus on those, the smaller stuff, like the stuff Chris and I hang out with, and I haven't worked with you guys as much, but we get into like weirdnesses around weird edge case things and stuff when we're having fun talking about stuff. But it all comes down to the end, those 3 things.
The multi-cloud talk thing was an interesting one because the reason I brought that up is because you almost see the theme across the board. I look at conferences as a way to realize what's going on in the world as well sometimes. And I think I imagine a lot of other people do as well. This whole KubeCon that's been running for the past 4 or 5 years. I think this year they had the Europe one as the largest ever Kubernetes conference they've ever had. And they said most people were practitioners. Until 2023, most people who used to come to KubeCon used to be people who used to maintain those open source repositories. This was the first year they had people who were using it in organizations like submarines, whatever flight, whatever, and going, who are these people using this and meat factories? Is there something that you see as upcoming that you're spending a lot of time or you're preparing yourself for, hey, come end of year, if I am on Thanksgiving holiday or it's Christmas holiday, I'm going to sit down, probably start looking at this particular topic for whatever. So I'm going to start.
You know, we're all going to say the same thing, right?
Like if I say,
That one is off the list.
yeah, that's right. Outside of that, two-letter word, which we'll sing in the end together unanimously.
I have been spending a lot of time around isolation. Earlier on in my cloud security experience, I was maintaining an open source project that takes permissions away when they're not used. That was great. Like, it was written by somebody on the team before me. Really cool tool. It's awesome. But it's not where I see things go. Because instead of taking away individual permissions from something that's amongst a ton of other things that are in really bad shape, if we could move those things to be isolated amongst themselves, they can have whatever permissions they want inside of their little box. And they can't affect anybody else outside of that.
Yeah, I think for me, something I see myself focusing more on is just more front door governance, shifting left, ensuring that the guard is already there. Make the developer's life easier. That's something I'm always thinking, all right, instead of just pointing the finger at the developer, hey, you go solve this, and I disappear. Give them an opportunity to develop real fast without having to worry about the little things, the compliance and all that. Instead, what I'm trying to do is do my best to make sure that the environments that they're using, all of that, it's bulletproof as much as possible. There's no such thing as 100% compliance or 100% security, but just trying to make their jobs easier. That front door governance, that's something I see myself diving.
I'm going to say Kubernetes because I've not touched it. This is what you millennial kids. You're on the Kubernetes. My technology in the cloud path went from physical servers on-prem to VMware for a few years to, hey, we're going to go to the public cloud and let's do Lambda. We bypassed EC2, we bypassed containers, and went straight from VMware on-prem to Lambda function. So I've done a couple Docker files, but not a lot. So I really do need to understand and dive deeper into Kubernetes because, hey, did you know you can actually publicly expose a Kubernetes API endpoint in AWS? And I want to poke at that and be able to articulate for my builders what that means. The thing I like doing is articulating the risk to builders until I can break something and until I've walked not a mile in their shoe, but at least 20 feet in their shoe, building a mean factory in Kubernetes, then I don't know it yet.
Did you know it's public by default?
Kubernetes is public by default?
I think Kubernetes API is public by default.
Okay.
That's first wireless.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong?
That's the funniest part. Because the first time I'm like, wait, what? Like, it's not.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you yesterday, but what I'm focused on these days is edge security, which anything, I define that anything between the user, client, laptop, or device and the public subnet.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't care about what's in the private subnet, public subnet. And the reason for that is not all product teams use just like CloudFront, ALBs and stuff like that. They could bring in Cloudflare workers, Akamai CDNs. There are complicated use cases where they put AWS connected to Akamai to deliver applications. I don't want to mention the word, but I have to, which AI at the edge. And
We're supposed to say it together.
yeah.
No, it's not gone.
This is my area of interest for me these days. So what's happening on the edge, gateways that you custom built to deliver and stuff like that that accept user traffic. There's complexity of the path, like how many hops does the request touch before it fetch data from S3 or database or something. This is my
Parameter security more on the edge.
probably.
And that's super important as we talk about multi-cloud because one, multi-cloud and multi-CDN, would you say multi-CDN is
Yep.
complex too. Plus now your multi-CDN and your multi-cloud. That's a very key area to dive into.
Let's be me updated multi-CDN expert.
There we go. Yeah.
It's tough because there's a half dozen different technologies I'm constantly like working on and trying to up my skills on. I think my biggest focus effort is on community education right now. So not a specific technology, but taking all the crazy stuff that we've learned and kind of simplifying it and making others help learn that. And then on the tech front, it's the Voldemort. And Kubernetes, I've done some with, but not enough. I've been really fascinated, and this was spurred by a work project I didn't expect, with some of the CNI, the network aspects, and combining the network controllers and the different layers that you can get. So with Cilium and kind of some of those different models of the network stack, and then looking at combining it with Spiffy Spire and getting into some of the zero trust aspects where we have identity, network traffic, and we're making policy-based decisions. And that's why I'm hesitant, because there's a bunch of texts coming here, like Cedar can come into play for authorizations within an app that has awareness of network and endpoints and dealing with the distributed identities pieces of it.
Yeah, I feel like that actually is something that I've been stuffing in the back of my head, the whole Spiffy Spire and that sort of granular level of controls in Kubernetes. I'm still gonna put that in the back corner. I'm gonna talk about that. In addition to the SageMaker, Airflow, those sorts of platforms I mentioned earlier, I'm also thinking a lot about egress solutions. And I would say egress solutions that actually make sense. I feel like I hear a lot about egress solutions that really only solve half the problem. And I find that I get really concerned about the non-traditional egress paths that I think are the most dangerous, but also the most unsupported in traditional patterns. So for me, it's about egress patterns that kind of are a bit more holistic, that sense.
I think my biggest thing, so I'm really starting to focus on right now, is really multi-cloud, cloud incident response control development and engineering in conjunction with threat modeling. I think threat modeling is something that there's not a lot of discussion about, and it's quite overlooked, honestly, in the cloud, because there's so many different risks that pop up with each individual service. And there's somebody who has development experience. I believe that's where my passion really lies within the cloud, building some controls to help put out those fires and help aid our incident responders and whatnot. And of course, always continuing education is definitely a given with that, because always going to be learning something new. So.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm surprised nobody was talking about the post-military quantum grade encryption stuff that was available in the new Graviton processors.
I'm going to defend post-quantum crypto. The reason that especially the banks care is because the stuff they encrypt today will get exposed once crypto or quantum cracking comes into play. So they've got it. You have to do that now, because if you wait until the quantum computers are there, which, by the way, who doesn't think the NSA has?
They've stopped complaining about an encryption, so they probably haven't.
I guess we've been talking about all our experience and all our sides of the story. Do you feel there is something on the other side, the cloud service provider? I don't want to name it.
Those guys.
I think there's been a general sense that there could be more done by the CSPs across the board.
I think there's a large report from the United States government about that.
Yeah, but no, it's like the same thing where I used to get frustrated when people would say, oh, we want to charge you extra for 2FA. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to charge extra for 2FA? Yeah. It should be security is number one, so why is that expensive? But I'm curious if you guys had, and this is for anyone basically, are there things you notice? I have one which if I give it out, then it's going to be very obvious which PSP is, so I'm going to stop, not talk about it.
I'll take the hit. Microsoft's a national security risk.
Oh.
It's not me making it up. That is, the federal government has said so, and it has been called out for not being as mature as the others. Now, that said, they all have their various issues. We've talked earlier about secure defaults, like making it. So I'll give you an example. When I first started on AWS, when they first released, when you launched an instance, the launch wizard security groups had no access. Port 22 was not open by default. Amazon had to turn that on later because 9 out of 10 people launching an instance would call Amazon support saying, I can't log into my instance. That was a secure default that had to be changed due for customer reasons. So I think we have to admit all of them can be doing things better, and they are adding so much complexity without being able to pull the puzzle pieces together that experts like us, my entire job is to keep up on this stuff, and I can't keep up on this stuff. And that's what I get paid to do. There's no way you can keep up with all of the latest and greatest. So I think, I'm not saying slow innovation, but I am saying accessibility on the security pieces And we have one that structurally, now I also know that they have that problem because I used Recall and it showed me all their old problems. And another little jive, there's cultural issues there that need to be dealt with as well. So room for improvement across the board. One is really standing out now, and it's important because they're so vital. I use Office 365. I use
Teams.
Xbox gaming and all their stuff.
Teams.
We need them to be better. We need to encourage them. We need them to be secure, and they have very smart security people in there. It's just that they've been pushed.
It's a cultural issue.
Is doing security better in one over the other? And feel free to name CSP if you like.
Yeah.
Which one stands out for you guys? Out of curiosity.
For me, AWS. AWS is the one I'm deepest in.
Okay. And for you?
I would say AWS because GCP, I feel dibble and dabble in it, but I just don't understand how to do anything secure.
There are actually 2 or 3 things in Azure that they do better than AWS.
Right.
So the RBAC model, you can never get to the granularity of AWS, but the application of it from the top down from the beginning is easier. So there's a reduced complexity to get to an okay. You still have to get much deeper. You have to pay for custom policies. You have to be on the right support level to get those, which is garbage. Or you have to pay more for denied policies, might still be in preview. But for an enterprise person with low experience coming in, if you go to AWS, the foot guns are pointed at your head. If you go to Azure, the foot guns are pointed at your feet. Then Azure policy actually works well because there's a lot of them built in, and they have alert policies. It's not all block policies like an SCP, so they've got a bunch of that built in. So it's not all bad, but it's still, there's the more fundamental issues.
There's also one thing I like to point out, and I've spoken with various different security leaders within various different CSPs. And one thing I want to point out is that there is more community support for AWS's environment that allows for people to be able to implement security framework solutions at a rapid pace versus other CSPs because of lack of documentation, like community support.
The open source community in AWS is
massive.
Yeah, they had a head start.
Yeah, that's right. They had the advantage.
But we have a cloud security community we all participate in, and which CSPs are represented there?
It's weighted.
I think that talking about the protection part, I find it interesting how the licensing model, because I've got a few rapid fire, as I want to call them, things that I feel a lot of us community hate, and it's on the tail end as well now. That what do you guys think about the way we are licensed by the consumption? Like, you know how to your point about the privacy thing, and you mentioned the Microsoft license. If you don't have E5, they basically don't have anything. So when you go for Amazon, you pay for what you consume.
Right.
If you go for Azure, you basically, if you have E5, oh great. Otherwise, you can upgrade to E5, get all the security features in the world, including DLP, all of that. But
still won't keep the Chinese out.
yeah, there is that. But I feel like, is there one thing that bothers you about any of the cloud service providers?
It's not like a specific service, but I feel like this is for all of them. I feel like the cloud service providers can communicate a bit more. Again, they do talk about the shared responsibility model. They don't talk about enough how the shared responsibility model looks a little different depending on the services that you use. Mm-hmm. I feel like they can do a better job of communicating that.
So developers would not understand that easily because they just draw the line in the part where they think it's, oh, that's your diagram. I guess that's
That's it.
yeah.
That's like, but the responsibility that you have could be 70%, and then theirs can be 30% depending on the service that you use. 'Cause some services you have managed services, and some services are not managed. Depending on the service that you use, it's going to look a little different. And understanding what your responsibility looks like depending on the service is very key to having a healthy posture in terms of security.
The thing I dislike, I also like sometimes it has nothing to do with support or engagement or anything, is AWS makes it very, AWS is like purchasing furniture from IKEA. You have to bring it all together. So if you want to host a website on AWS, there's 17 ways of doing that.
Yeah.
That gives developers so much flexibility and anyone could do anything. It's also fun when you're building. If you're building a solution, there's so many ways to get the job done.
Yeah.
It's a creative way of doing something, but it's makes security difficult. So when I'm building, I'm having fun because I can bring pieces together and get something done. Developers get to do that as well, but if you come to secure it, you're in trouble. It's hard.
One of the most impactful things the cloud providers could do that they don't do today, every provider should give you basic CSPM for free. Just flat out.
Yep.
I built a commercial CSPM platform and I still work for a company that sells that. And I still think it shouldn't exist. Let the third-party vendors do the more advanced stuff. if you think about somebody coming without a lot of cloud knowledge starting to experiment and how quickly they can make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that they have to have an ISO 27001 and NIST 853 level support. It's the fundamentals. That should be free. It's not, it used to be free in Azure. It's not anymore. It's not free in AWS. And if you use Security Hub, then you got to pay config. And that blows that out of the water pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Google Security Command Center, you got to pay for that. That's number one. And then number two would be to support that some level of what we all know as guard duty, but some level of alerting, misuse, and abuse alerting. And we actually get some of that for really super egregious things in AWS. But if you go on Reddit and you look at the kinds of mistakes people make and the charges they get and the incidents, if you work with enterprises who are, or even small businesses at lower levels, those two things alone would go a really long way.
Yeah.
The third was good SSO in AWS, and that one actually we can get now.
One thing to just get out, hopefully analyst is watching this. This two pizza thing is not working.
Yeah.
Like these people are not talking. This service doesn't talk to that service. Like I can't automate.
Yeah.
So it's getting old.
And it is a complete
Yes.
lack of customer obsession on the part of AWS to have 4 different ways to describe a IAM call. Is it get? Is it list? Is it describe? No.
Also, there's literally nowhere that you can look to get a list of everything in an AWS account. No matter how much money you pay, there's no one reference for that.
I think one of my biggest problems that I have is the limit on, or I would say the ETA for you to be able to see when you made an API call in CloudStrike. It's not real time. And I think that from an auditability standpoint, if I have someone who's making an API call to assume a role that's not supposed to be assumed a role, I have to wait 15 minutes.
So it is if you pay. Turn on event rate. Cha-ching, cha-ching.
But we gotta hit a play, right? But I think that's something that should be that it's commonsensical, but you should that should be free, right? You should have to have a service to be able to. Oh, now I have to create an event trigger for this particular API call so that it then triggers this thing and that thing.
As a vendor, I love it because when customers send us their events, the customer's paying to send us the events. We don't pay anything to receive them, which might also be a problem.
As an AWS person, I wish there was more education of the community around more advanced or slightly off the golden path implementations of things. I love being at Slack and chatting with y'all, but part of me just wishes I didn't have to be.
Oh.
Subscribe to the top of someone's specific LinkedIn post to actually learn about. Oh, I want to do this implementation that's not mentioned anywhere in the AWS docs, and support is I don't know. Here's the AWS docs. That is something I would like to see more as a user.
Yeah, more actual use cases with implementation. Perhaps automation as well as to how we get features code for it.
Yeah, and even if this is not official approved references, I get it, that's fine. But if it's only the perfect signed off way or nothing, that's where I leave unsatisfied.
They need to empower the community to understand how we need to handle our side of shared responsibility. And they need to empower the community to understand where the rough edges are on their side and accept the responsible disclosures that are coming from the community.
There's an antagonistic relationship that the CSPs overall, not just AWS, have with researchers who are trying to share information so that we can all be better. And that needs to stop.
Let's be real. So
Yeah.
the problem, I'm not fully defending the CSPs here, but having been on multiple sides of this, is a lot of the research that comes out is from vendors who want to get free marketing and headlines to sell their products. So some of the things that are reported, they're often all important and valuable, but the reason Chris and I wrote this a whole threat model is because we want to see that information, but CISOs don't know that's not the problem, that the problem is access keys and GitHub. And so there's the muddling of the waters and those pieces of it that can be difficult. So I will tend to err on the side of the researchers, and I want that work and I want to publish. And we know that vendors are trying to suppress that, not the vendors' research teams, but other
Providers.
try to suppress that and back them in the corners and play legal games. And that shouldn't be done. They need to be better about that piece of it. But we also need to temper it because we also need the researchers to stop coming up with some overhyped, stupid, whatever name for the one like little thing that they found. It's like,
If it
all
doesn't have
right,
a logo, it's not important.
fine, but we're done. We had Blaster and we had Heartbleed, and can we just end it all and give them numbers at this point instead of like these?
Oh yeah, I mean, we haven't got to the whole
websites.
CVE conversation. There can't be a CVE for cloud security vulnerabilities or misconfigurations and all of that. For people who are coming into the industry today, what's your advice to someone who's walking the path of cloud security? Sounds like a cool field. Where should they start?
I would say this community. That's what drives so much of this. And I learned so much from a lot of the people in this room and just so many people that are in the Cloud Security Forum Slack. And it's awesome. And people are so nice and so helpful and incredibly smart.
Yeah.
And it's such a great resource.
One thing, if you're trying to get into this line of work, understand that there's so many resources out there. There's so many people giving advice across social media platforms. You have to do your due diligence, do your research, and sometimes turn down the noise a little bit. You shouldn't listen to everybody, because if you listen to everybody, you're not listening to anybody. And you can't make everybody happy, right? So if you're new to this, I understand it can be intimidating. Even now, I've been doing this for a minute, and I still feel intimidated at times. I would say definitely be mindful of who you're listening to and your advice and who you're following, because there's a lot of advice out there, but not all advice is good advice.
Because you do some mentorship thing as well, right? I think-
I'm into folks.
Because I think it's what else. The reason I brought that up is because do you feel getting a mentor is helpful for people and find the right kind of mentor?
Yeah. So there's different types of mentors. Some mentors, they might be old school. They might not hit you up at all. And it's on you to maintain that relationship as well. So everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
But what I do recommend is finding a mentor that you can connect with and you can relate to. I think it will be a game changer. It makes your career a lot easier. It makes life a lot easier. The cool part about getting mentors is that, especially in this community, people want to help. That's what I love about the security community, the tech community. People just want to help. And I recommend definitely get a mentor and do your due diligence. What you don't do is DM someone on LinkedIn and say, be my mentor. I'm saying this from experience. I've done this, and I've left unread people. I've left unread. So don't write an essay and tell someone to be my mentor on the first message to somebody on social media platform. Go outside, like my friend here said, check in with community, go outside, meet with people. That's the way to go.
So I'm going to quote Werner here and say, just go build. And to your point, it is fun to build something in AWS. It's reasonably inexpensive from a cash out of pocket.
Be
to
careful,
go
though.
build. It gets a lot more expensive when you put your access keys in GitHub or leave a SageMaker instance running over the weekend. But you can build, and you will learn things from that building. And that will, as a security professional, make you more empathetic to the builders that you want to then support. So the first project I did in AWS was building a Minecraft server for my daughter that would spin up at 3 p.m. when she got home from school and would shut down at 8 p.m. when it was her get off electronics time. And that was an EC2 instance and a Lambda function to turn it on and off, and messing around a little bit with writing scripts to update Route 53 so that Minecraft.win17.com will point into the right IP address. That was my first IAC project. Something slightly practical. It cost me like $5-7 a month. So just go build.
I think I'm going to build on top of what the foundation I just got from Chris and Abdie, because first, who to follow? I would follow someone who was able to build something and sell it, because the market is the ultimate judge.
Yeah.
Which anyone who's able to commercialize cloud security, that's someone you can see what they have in Git, read a blog.
Don't look at my game.
Don't look at my
I'll click on
So don't follow everyone. Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
So don't be in the business of always consuming. Now you have to go build.
Yeah.
Meaning build making stuff, like producing stuff. Learn in public. Go get a domain, first name, last name. Just put your notes there. The sooner you start, the better. Doesn't have to be a perfect blog and pictures and formatted and grammar is correct. Just learn in public. Leave it there. In 5 years, you would be surprised with that.
Obviously support all of that because the community in the building was how I got started. By experimenting, I was forced to build some stuff we were actually building the training classes for the Cloud Security Alliance, and it forced me to learn automation skills and stuff I'd never had to learn before. I have that thing, Cloud Security Lab a week, that it's just an email newsletter. You can subscribe to it, and it starts, you have to have zero cloud knowledge and zero security knowledge, and the goal is to teach you how to build a large-scale enterprise deployment. So about 6 months into it at this point, I plan to keep that going on for as long as
I can see you, I can just.
I spin up an EC2 instance sometimes.
We're gonna get to Chris and I were talking about that. I got to get it over to EC2. We haven't done that yet. But the other part is like your show, the people watching this,
Thank you.
the newsletters are good sources. You don't have to understand everything in them because some of them will talk about the biggest bombs and everything else. But be a consumer of like different ideas and personalities and stuff. Can't read and subscribe and listen to everybody. And I would say use those more than Twitter or LinkedIn or Mastodon or whatever, because that's so noisy. That might help you figure out who to look towards. You get in the cycle of just always trying to keep up with what I miss and what I miss and what I miss. And when you're just getting into the field and learning, it's just about absorbing as much as you can and then figuring out which part of it's most interesting to you. Is it IR? Is it building? Is it whatever?
Especially when I was first starting out, and there were definitely less services than there are even today, but really being aware of where you as an individual are starting. Like my first project was doing like config auto remediation before config auto remediation was formally supported. And then from there, built into the, okay, what other rules could we add? So if you're coming maybe from more of a software background, focus then on what are the components that it would be to run, your code just on an EC2 and then networking to your database, and then the classic exposing it to the internet if you chose to do that. Yeah, and trying to focus on one area to start and dip your feet into instead of maybe like just jumping into the ocean.
Network as much as possible and ask a lot of questions. The field itself is like really broad. There's a lot of areas and avenues that you can specialize. Find what works for you and what you're truly interested in, and then take a stab at it, build your portfolio. If you feel that you want to pivot into something different, don't hesitate to do so. Because at the end of the day, it's your journey. And I think that you have to be aware enough to understand that you will end up wearing multiple hats in your career as you matriculate through it. It's going to happen. So it's just a matter of just accepting it, build your network, build your brand, and ask as many questions as possible. And pay it forward. Always pay it forward.
I want to say one more thing on community, because we didn't actually say it. Forward CloudSec. We have a Slack community that we are all in. We have a annual, now twice a year, all over the globe conference that many of us are organizers, former speakers, future speakers at. And we always describe Forward CloudSec as a graduate level kind of conference compared to the undergraduate stuff that you would see at Reinforce. But the Slack is really where we can have these kinds of questions around. Did you see what happens when you commit 8 access keys to a public GitHub repo and support comes back with 8 different weird responses to that? All of that are things that we can discuss in that community. And even if you're like too nervous to contribute, just watching the conversation happen, to your point of learning in public, we're all learning in public in the Slack channel.
My YouTube channel is DevSec Blueprint. So essentially what I talk about mostly is cloud security in a generic sense and DevSecOps. It's mostly my background, my specialty is helping developers become more secure and also developing and building and deploying, testing secure applications with cloud products and services. If you got interested in that content, definitely give me a follow on that at Damien Burks, and also my blog as well.
One project that Shilpa and I have been running is called Cloud Security Bootcamp, and goes back to what you were saying earlier about implementation. So we've been running the podcast for almost 5 years now. Over time, we started getting questions about that. Hey, I want to do this specific thing. Every time we would upload a video on Cloud Security podcast for, hey, I did this thing, because for whatever class I was teaching for anything, and it just blow up. I'm going, experienced people to what you said. Some of us take that information for granted, but for everyone else, oh my God, it's just gold. Can you get some more of this? Whatever the things are. Like, so we created a separate YouTube channel for all of this. The reason I bring that whole Cloud Security Bootcamp thing is because where do we stand on the whole, you mentioned graduate, undergraduate. A lot of people are graduating today. They've all been told cloud is amazing. It's on Amazon, Google, Microsoft. We have a great future ahead. Just find something in cloud. If you skip the IT fundamentals and you jump straight to cloud, I can't teach someone network. And I'm being very conscious on that Cloud Security Bootcamp channel as well that, hey, I'm not teaching you fundamentals of networking, that how do 2 servers talk to each other.
You need IT in general to be good at cloud. Because what is the cloud? The cloud is somebody else's computer. What does somebody else's computer run in? It's running an operating system. You need to know the fundamentals of an operating system, what an environment variable is, because you have environment variables, whether they're in the hypervisor, which you don't see in cloud, or they're in the EC2 instance, or they're in the container, or they're in the Lambda, or they're in the code build, or they're in this other higher order service that takes and executes code. So you need some of those fundamentals. Do you need to have gone through and be as old and grizzled as I am on having installed Linux on floppy disks? No, but you need some of that. So yes, you should log into a Linux box and know how it works. If you've got a Mac, open terminal, understand what that means.
By learning the fundamentals, it really gives you an appreciation for the cloud,
Yeah.
for serverless,
Yeah.
and for all these managed services. You get an appreciation for it when you understand what's going on under the hood. And think about it like this too. Think about athletes. Athletes have to work on the fundamentals all the time. If you look at basketball players, sorry.
Kobe Bryant benches
Yeah.
the net every day. Yeah.
Kobe Bryant, what was he practicing? He was always practicing layups. He was practicing basic moves in the game. He's doing all these crazy moves in the game, but that's because the foundation was laid there. I think learning the fundamentals is very valuable. Yeah.
But I would say I don't want that to stop.
Don't let that stop. Yeah,
And
sure.
From my personal experience, I was one of the random people who like accidentally landed a cloud security
Oh,
job
wow.
out of college, which was
Oh, we have one.
Nice.
Good job.
it was
got
an
a talent.
accident. It wasn't even on purpose.
They said sign here, I signed it.
What did you think you were flying?
At the time, in short, I joined a big enterprise bank, and when I signed the job offer, it was not a cloud security team, and by the time I got there,
It became
it
a
was a cloud security team. So I would say you can learn it a little bit as you go, but do know it will hamper you, especially like not knowing those fundamentals and things. When we're looking at the compute services, you can get away with it, I think, a bit more with Lambda and those other abstracted. But I would say if you're doing Kubernetes, you got to know it at that point.
We're talking about this in the context of graduating and going into a job, but it doesn't need to be that either. The background that you can get and the experience that you have from literally any other job can be applied to cloud security, like
Yeah.
literally everything.
And don't let imposter syndrome, oh, I don't know as much about this as somebody else, or I don't know how the packet gets from point A to point B. Don't worry about that. There is no compression algorithm for experience, so you're going to learn as you go. That is part of all of our journeys here, is scratching our heads and trying to figure out, and then things will change. You'll suddenly go from init D to system D, and you'll be like, oh, but don't let that slow you down. Leverage what skills you have. They don't have to be completely technical to put your foot in the door.
I want to point out, like, you definitely want to make sure that not only you work on your technical skills, but your interpersonal skills as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Oh, my God, yeah.
patience is the number one skill you have to have as in doing anything in the cloud, especially as a cloud security engineer, because it will be tested. You will be banging your head up against the wall, asking yourself, what the hell am I doing? It's like day one every day sometimes. So you just got to remember that it comes with the territory. So just make sure you have patience and just understand that you're not the only person who may feel that way.
Yeah.
And that's where community helps.
Yes.
100%.
Community baby.
All right, final question. So if you were not in cloud security or technical person at all, what would you be doing?
Honestly, man, before all of this, I wanted to be a mechanic. I wanted to work with cars.
Oh,
God, it makes
It's
so
either
much sense.
cars or I want to be an FBI. Those are my two things.
So what's the
The FBI.
FBI? Oh, wow, okay. So it's flipping the badge at people like, FBI, get down the floor.
Why I'm bad noise waste.
Yeah.
This might be a little bit of a niche answer, but I think I would definitely thrive as one of those people that worked at airports, like inspecting overseas package import for drugs or
watched that
other
show.
illegal imports, specifically packages. I don't really want to talk to people. Monitoring packages, I think I can.
So cloud security.
So you'd be really good at software bill of material, right?
That's fine.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Don't say yes bomb in an airport.
Not those two words together.
Paramedic in a national park.
Oh, wow.
That's my retirement plan. We're going to be seasonal. My wife's going to be an interpretive ranger. I'll be a rescue/paramedic ranger.
And we know for a fact that people every year will go and try and pet the buffaloes in Yellowstone.
Exactly. Or they'll take selfies on the edge of whatever.
So I like to be in the like backcountry rugged. I like it there. And the only thing I thought about was like taking people and charging them for that payout.
Oh,
Taking
the guy.
over there,
Yeah, yeah,
Washington State, and
I have friends who do that for a living now.
There you
It's
go.
real.
all right, hook me up.
Amazing.
How can I do that? But I do that with friends.
Yeah.
But how can I do it for a living? That would be.
I'm glad we heard it. Now you can connect and find out nothing.
If I had to pick a different career right now, I'd be a travel blogger. Some people have a face for radio. I have a voice for blogging. So I would be a travel blogger.
I wanted to become an economist. That was my original plan.
No? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because I just love studying how
The world
the world works, the way societies work, the way trade, the history of trade, the history of commerce, the history of money. That stuff interests me. And then I found out I need to get my PhD to become an economist. Yeah, if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably become an economist.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Either running a bakery or a coffee shop.
Oh.
Like the opposite. Because I want to just like really spend some time with some dough.
I'm sorry, but you look like you can make a good shot.
Yeah. You have the look for it, yeah.
I'll take that.
It's very trustworthy.
No, the funny thing, my retirement plan is the same as well. I would love to open a coffee shop.
Yeah.
I've been actually scouting based in London already. I appreciate all of you joining us and sharing all that as well. And I look forward to when this comes out and the internet roars. But thank you everyone for coming in.
It's been a pleasure.
I look forward to that episode, people.
So I'm getting on the internet. I'm sending this to my mom.
Also, thanks so much.
Yeah, that's been
Good. And that's the episode, people. See you on. Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. We have been running for the past 5 years, so I'm sure we haven't covered everything cloud security yet. And if there's a particular cloud security topic that we can cover for you in an interview format on Cloud Security Podcast, or make a training video on tutorials on Cloud Security Bootcamp, definitely reach out to us on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. By the way, if you're interested in AI and cybersecurity, as many cybersecurity leaders are, you might be interested in our sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which I run with former CSO of Robinhood, Caleb Seamer, where we talk about everything AI and cybersecurity. How can organizations deal with cybersecurity on AI systems, AI platforms, whatever AI has to bring next as the evolution of ChatGPT and everything else continues. If you have any other suggestions, definitely drop them on info@cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. I'll drop that in the description and the show notes as well, so you can reach out to us easily. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Peace.